Welcome to Elizabeth's Chronicles. If you love true crime, consider subscribing. William Bradford Bishop Jr. was born August 1, 1936 in Pasadena, California, to parents Lobelia and William Bradford Bishop Sr. He graduated from South Pasadena High School, and received a Bachelor of Science degree in History from Yale University, and a Master of Arts degree in International Studies from Middlebury College. Bishop also has a bachelor's degree in American Studies from Yale, and a master's degree in Italian from Middlebury College. Additionally, he also holds a master's degree in African Studies from UCLA. In 1959, he graduated from Yale, and married his high school sweetheart Annette Weiss. The couple had 3 sons. He then joined the United States Army, and spent 4 years working in counterintelligence. Bishop fluently spoke 5 languages: English, Italian, French, Serbo-Croatian, and Spanish. After leaving the Army, Bishop joined the U.S. State Department, and served in the Foreign Service at many postings overseas. He has been posted in the Italian cities of Verona, Milan, and Florence. He also served in Africa, as well as Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and Gaborone in Botswana, from 1972 to 1974. Bishop's last posting, which began in 1974, was at State Department headquarters in Washington, D.C., as an assistant chief in the Division of Special Activities and Commercial Treaties. He was living in Bethesda, Maryland, with his wife and 3 sons as well as his mother, Lobelia. On March 1, 1976, Bishop found out that he would not be receiving a much-wanted promotion. He told his secretary he was feeling ill, and left his office. He drove to his bank, then he withdrew several $100s. He then went to Montgomery Mall, where he bought a sledgehammer and gas can. He then filled the gas can and the tank of his 1974 Chevrolet station wagon at a nearby gas station. After that, he drove to a hardware store, where he purchased a pitchfork and shovel. Bishop returned home around 7:30 to 8 p.m. He walked in and killed his wife first with the sledgehammer. As he finished, his mother returned from walking the family dog, and she received the same fate. He then made his way upstairs, where he killed his 3 sons, as they lay sleeping in their beds. Bishop put his family's bodies into his station wagon, along with the family dog, who was unharmed, and drove 275 miles, to Columbia, North Carolina. He found a wooded swamp area, and dug a shallow hole. He piled his family into the hole, poured gasoline all over the bodies, and set them on fire, then drove away into the night. That evening, bodies were found in North Carolina in a hole. Dental records confirmed it was that of the Bishop family. On March 18, Bishop's station wagon was found at an isolated campground in Elkmont, Tennessee. Inside they found dog biscuits, a shotgun, a shaving kit, an axe, a bloody blanket, and Bishop's medication. The spare tire well was full of blood. A witness stated that the car had been there for several days. Authorities believe that Bishop joined a group of hikers on the Appalachian Trail. On March 10, neighbors living around Bishop's home contacted police after not seeing the family for some time. After noticing blood on the front porch, police made entry and discovered more blood in the front hall and bedrooms. On March 11, a grand jury indicted Bishop on 5 counts of first-degree murder, and other charges. The motive for Bishop murdering his entire family was never identified. And the brutality in how he murdered them baffled authorities. It was discovered that during the murders, he saved the most vicious attack for his oldest son, Pino. He was struck with such force that it was unimaginable. The autopsy showed that he was hit with such anger and violence that far exceeds what the others suffered. It was reported that there was no evidence of infidelity, and no financial issues. The only issue was Bishop being passed over for a promotion. He had no history of work-related problems. It was known by many that he was unhappy at his desk job, and wanted another foreign posting, but his wife refused. Previously, she had put her career on hold to raise their children, and was now enrolled, at the University of Maryland, in art studies. Bishop did not like this. He wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom. In 2010, authorities believed Bishop was living somewhere in Europe, or possibly in California, possibly as a teacher. They speculate he may have resorted to criminal activities. In 2014, the body of an unidentified man resembled Bishop was found. The man had been killed by a car while walking along an Alabama highway in 1981. The FBI exhumed the body, and a DNA test indicated the man was not Bishop. In 2011, 2 other reports that Bishop had died in France, and then Hong Kong were both proven false by fingerprints. In 2014, the FBI stated that Bishop was probably in the United States, in plain sight, and avoiding arrest by staying hidden. If arrested, it would enable law enforcement to run his fingerprints, and capture him. In the same year, the FBI requested forensic artist Karen Taylor to create an age progression sculpture, to show Bishop's projected appearance at about age 77. Using Taylor's sculpture, several progressed images were created by Lisa Shepard, to show the addition of facial hair, and glasses. Bradford Bishop has never been captured. If still alive, he would be 84 years old. Jeffrey MacDonald was born on October 12, 1943, in Jamaica, Queens, New York. He is the second of 3 children born to Robert and Dorothy MacDonald. His upbringing was in a poor household on Long Island. His father was a disciplinarian. He was never violent toward his family, but demanded strict obedience. He also demanded high achievements from his children. MacDonald attended Patchogue High School. He was a high achiever, and became president of the student council. He was king of the senior prom, and also voted most popular, and also most likely to succeed. In his 8th grade year, MacDonald has stated that he observed Colette walking down the hallway at school, with her best friend, and although he was attracted to both girls, he found Colette more attractive. A few weeks later, they started a friendship. Eventually, he took her on a date to the movies. They developed a brief romantic relationship that lasted into the 9th grade. MacDonald stated they fell in love while holding hands on a balcony, watching a movie called A Summer Place at a theater. The summer of his 9th grade school year, Colette broke up with MacDonald. He then started dating a girl named Penny Wells. MacDonald's high school grades earned him a 3-year scholarship at Princeton University, where he enrolled as a pre-medical student, in 1962. In his 2nd year of his studies, MacDonald and Wells had broken up. He quickly rekindled his romantic relationship with Colette, who was a freshman at Skidmore College, in Saratoga. The two regularly sent letters back and forth. He would often hitchhike to Skidmore College, to visit her on the weekends. At the time, their relationship was not exclusive. MacDonald was dating other women at the time. However, when learning that Colette was pregnant, he decided to settle down and marry her. The two married on September 14 of 1963, in New York City. Over 100 people attended the wedding, and the reception was held at the Fifth Avenue Hotel. For their honeymoon, they went to Cape Cod. Their first daughter, Kimberly Catherine, was born on April 18, 1964. After completing his scholarship at Princeton, MacDonald moved his family to Chicago in 1965, where he was accepted at Northwestern University Medical School. Colette committed to maintaining the small, 1-bedroom apartment, and raising their daughter, while MacDonald focused on his studies, also working several part-time jobs to assist with family finances. The next year, the family moved to a middle-class neighborhood. On May 8, 1967, Kristen Jean was born. MacDonald graduated from medical school in 1968. He moved his family to Bergenfield, New Jersey as he completed a one-year internship at the Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York, specializing in thoracic surgery. MacDonald recalled his internship year as a horrendous year for both himself and Colette, adding he often worked 36 hours straight, with only 12 hours at home. When at home, he was usually exhausted, and had very little interaction with his wife and children. After completing his internship, MacDonald and Colette vacationed in Aruba before MacDonald joined the Army. On June 28, 1969, MacDonald enlisted in the United States Army. He was sent to Fort Sam Houston, Texas for a 6-week physician's basic training course. While at Fort Sam Houston, he was assigned to the Army's Special Forces, Green Berets. He was then assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia, where he completed their paratrooper training course. MacDonald knew when joining the Army he might be deployed to serve in the Vietnam War. He later learned that, as a Green Beret doctor, he was unlikely to serve overseas. In late August of 1969, MacDonald reported to the 3rd Special Forces Group, Airborne, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to serve as their surgeon. His wife and children soon followed. The family resided at 544 Castle Drive, in a section of the base reserved for married officers. The area had security by military police. The couple grew in popularity with neighbors. However, the couple were known to have an occasional argument. Colette had 2 years of studies under her belt by the time MacDonald moved into their new apartment, joining his family. She had aspirations to obtain her bachelor's degree in English literature, and teach part-time. Their daughters had distinctive personalities. Kimberly was very feminine and intelligent, yet shy, while her younger sister was a tomboy who had a boisterous personality. On December 10, 1969, the 3rd Special Forces Group was deactivated, and MacDonald was sent back to base headquarters, 6th Special Forces Group, Airborne, 1st Special Forces, to serve as a preventative medical officer. Not long before Christmas, in 1969, MacDonald purchased his daughters a Shetland pony. He had plans to soon move the family to a farm in Connecticut. He hid the pony from his wife and daughters. He and his stepfather-in-law brought Colette and girls to the stable as a big surprise on Christmas Day. The girls named the pony Trooper. At this time, Colette was 3 months pregnant with their 3rd child, a son. She wrote a letter to a college friend, saying that she was happy and content, and that their baby son was due in July, and that would make their family complete. Right before 1970, MacDonald earned the rank of captain, and was planning to study advanced medical training at Yale, once he completed his tour of duty as a Green Beret doctor. On February 16, in the afternoon, MacDonald took his daughters to the stable to feed and ride their pony. They returned home at about 5:45 p.m. MacDonald then showered, and changed into his blue pajamas. The family ate dinner, then Colette left the house to attend an evening teaching class at Fort Bragg's North Carolina University Extension. MacDonald states, he then let his daughters ride on his back, playing horsey, as if he was their Shetland pony. He then puts Kristen to bed at approximately 7 p.m., Kimberly played a game on the coffee table. He then slept for about an hour. He woke and watched Kimberly's favorite television show, Laugh-In, with her before she also went to bed. Colette returned home at around 9:40 p.m. The two sat on the couch together, watching Johnny Carson. Colette retired to bed about halfway through the show. MacDonald says he also fell asleep on the couch sometime later. On February 17, 1970, at 3:42 a.m., Fort Bragg dispatchers received an emergency call from MacDonald. He faintly whispered into the receiver, "Hurry, 544 Castle Drive. Stabbing. He repeated this twice, then the operator then heard the sound of the phone dropping against the floor or wall. Military police arrived within 10 minutes of the call. At first, they thought this was just a domestic disturbance. The front door was closed and locked, and the house was dark. They knocked, but nobody answered. They made their way to the back of the residence, where a police sergeant found the back screen door closed but unlocked, and the back door wide open. Once they entered, the sergeant made his way to the master bedroom, then ran to the front door of the house, shouting, "Tell them to get Womack, as soon as possible." Colette was on the floor of the master bedroom, on her back. One of her eyes was open, and one breast was exposed. She had been repeatedly beaten, and both of her arms were broken. Later the pathologist noted that her wounds on her arms are defensive, an attempt to protect her face. She had been stabbed 21 times in the chest with an ice pick, and 16 times in the neck and chest area with a knife. Her trachea was severed in 2 places. A torn, bloody pajama top was pulled up on her chest, and a knife lay beside her on the floor. Jeffrey MacDonald was found laying face down beside her, wounded, but still alive. His head was on Colette's chest with one arm wrapped around her neck. As police entered, he whispered, "Check my kids." I heard my kids crying. 5-year-old Kimberly was located in her bed. She was bludgeoned in the head and body. She was also stabbed in the neck with a knife about 8 to 10 times. She lay on her left side. Her skull was fractured in 2 places, from at least 2 blows to the right side of her head, and an injury to her face that forced her cheekbone to protrude through her skin. The medical examiner later stated that the injuries to Kimberly's head were very severe, stating she had bruising to her brain, which led to coma, and death soon after. Straight across the hallway from Kimberly, 2-year-old Kristen was located in her bed, also on her left side, with a baby bottle nearby. She had been stabbed 33 times across the chest, neck, hands, and back with a knife, and 15 times with an ice pick. 2 of the knife wounds had penetrated her heart. The injuries inflicted by the ice pick were shallow. The injuries to her hands were speculated to be defensive wounds. On the headboard of Colette and MacDonald's bed, the word pig was written in blood. The blood was later determined to belong to Colette. After receiving care on the scene, MacDonald sat upright, then yelled, "Jesus Christ! Look at my wife! I'm gonna kill those damned acid heads!" He was immediately transported to Womack Hospital, screaming, "Let me see my kids!" Medical staff at the Womack Medical Center noticed the wounds MacDonald had received were much less severe than those inflicted upon his wife and daughters. His injuries were minor cuts, bruises, and fingernail scratches to his face and chest. None of those required stitches, and were not life-threatening. He had a mild concussion. The only invasive injury was a single stab wound to his torso area, between 2 ribs, and was only 5/8 of an inch deep. It was a clean, small cut. It did partially collapse his lung though. 9 days later, MacDonald was released from the hospital. When criminal investigators questioned MacDonald, he claimed that around 2 a.m., on February 17, he washed the evening dishes, and decided to go to bed, but his younger daughter had wet the bed, so he carried her to her bed, and he didn't want to wake his wife to change the sheets, so he took a blanket from Kristen's room, and had fallen asleep on the couch. He says he was later awakened by Colette and Kimberly's screams, and Colette shouting desperately for his help. He said he jumped to run to their aid, but was attacked by 3 men, 1 black and 2 white. He states one of the men had gloves on. He says a 4th intruder was a white female with long, blonde hair, possibly a wig. She was wearing knee-high boots, and a white floppy hat, that partially covered her face. She was holding a lighted candle, and chanting, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." He went on to say that the three men then hit him with a club and ice pick. The female stood nearby shouting, "Hit him again." He says that, during the attack, his pajama top was pulled over his head to his wrists, and he had used this as a defense to ward off the thrusts from the ice pick. He says he was eventually knocked unconscious by the intruders. Later he regained consciousness, and noticed the intruders had left the house. He made his way, stumbling, from room to room, attempting mouth-to-mouth resuscitation efforts on each of his children, but they were already gone. He then found his wife. He pulled a paring knife from her chest, and tossed it on the floor, then tried to find a pulse. When he couldn't find signs of life, he draped his pajama jacket over her body, then called for help. Police began searching all vehicles in and around Fort Bragg. They were looking for two white men, one black man, and a white woman with blonde hair wearing a floppy hat. Authorities wanted to catch these four intruders that had allegedly attacked MacDonald and his family. Police failed to locate the four intruders, and the search ended by 6 a.m. At daylight on the morning of the murders, investigators found the murder weapons outside the back door. An old hickory kitchen knife, an ice pick, and a 31-inch long piece of lumber that had two blue, bloody threads attached. All of the items were from the MacDonald home. Yet, MacDonald claimed that he had never seen these items before. Army investigators quickly discovered that MacDonald's account of what happened didn't support the evidence. As they studied the evidence, they didn't believe his version of events. MacDonald is trained in hand-to-hand combat, yet the living room where he claims to have fought for his life against three armed intruders, showed very little signs of a struggle. The coffee table was knocked to one side, and the magazines slid off the table. And a flower pot had fallen from the table as well. No signs of a violent struggle. Furthermore, MacDonald's neighbors said they heard no signs of a struggle or disturbance coming from the MacDonald home in the hours of the incident. The only thing neighbors heard was Colette shouting in a loud and angry voice. The 16-year-old babysitter, who babysat for the MacDonalds, told investigators that the MacDonalds seemed indifferent to each other for about a month before the murders. In addition, no fibers from MacDonald's torn pajamas were found in the living room, where he claimed it was torn in the struggle. However, fibers were actually found beneath Colette's body, and in the bedroom of both daughters, and one fiber was found underneath the fingernail of Kristen. A fragment of skin was also found under Colette's fingernails, but that evidence was later lost. Blood-stained splinters from the lumber was recovered from all three bedrooms, but not the living room where MacDonald claims he was attacked. There was no blood or fingerprints found on the phone MacDonald claimed to have used to call for help after checking each family member and trying to resuscitate them. And the blood-stained surgical glove tip that was found beneath the headboard where the word pig was written in blood, the glove tip was an identical match to the ones kept in MacDonald's own kitchen. MacDonald claimed that the woman who was wearing the floppy hat was also wearing knee-high boots that had water dripping from them, but no footprints were found, only his bloody bare footprint which led into Kristen's bedroom, leading from the child's bed in the direction of the doorway. On the night of the murders, it was pouring the rain, yet none of the intruders left a single footprint. By February 23, Marshal Robert Kruinek informed the FBI to stop their search for the four unknown intruders. In March, the results of forensic testing of the blood, hair, and fiber samples within the MacDonald home came, showing that the evidence contradicted MacDonald's accounts of his movements. These findings led investigators to believe that he is, in fact, the one who committed these murders. Investigators were puzzled as to why Colette's blood was found in Kristen's bedroom, although all three victims were found in separate rooms, leading investigators to believe they had been attacked separately. Also, although blood evidence proves Kimberly had been attacked as she entered the master bedroom, investigators question why home intruders would bother to carry her back to her own bedroom to finish their attack. A major turning point in this case is that fact that all four members of the MacDonald family had different blood types. This is a statistical anomaly. This assisted investigators in figuring out the movements of each family member and the likely events that unfold on that horrific night. Due to the four different blood types, investigators were able to reconstruct the likely scenario of what actually happened. Police stated that from the blood evidence, they believe that an argument, or fight between Colette and MacDonald started in the couple's bedroom, maybe over Kristen's repeatedly wetting the bed, or his cheating. Investigators surmised that the disagreement turned physical, and she may have hit him on the forehead with a hairbrush, or something similar, which resulted in the mark on his forehead. He became enraged, and struck her, probably with his fists at first, and then turning to a piece of lumber. Kimberly may have heard the struggle, and came to see what was happening. As she entered the doorway, he swung and hit her in the head. This is why blood and brain matter was found in the doorway. This was probably accident. He may have hit her as he swung the lumber to hit his wife. She was fatally injured, so he finished her off after carrying her back to the bedroom. He stabbed her numerous times. He probably thought Colette was already dead at this time. But she miraculously regained consciousness, and made her way to Kristen's bedroom in a desperate attempt to save her other daughter. She threw her body over her daughter's. At the same time, MacDonald entered the room to kill the only remaining witness, and discovered Colette was still alive. He killed them both. He wrapped Colette's body in a sheet, and carried her body back to their bedroom, which left the smudged footprint matching her blood type as he exited Kristen's room. They found a magazine article on their coffee table, with the entire story of the Manson family murders. They theorized that MacDonald attempted to hide the murders, by using that story. He put on surgical gloves found in his kitchen closet. Then he went to the master bedroom, where he used Colette's blood to write the word pig on the headboard. He then laid his torn pajama top over his wife's dead body, and stabbed her in the chest numerous times with the ice pick. He then wiped down the weapons, removing his fingerprints. He threw them just outside the back door. To make this all seem believable, he would need to injure himself. He took a scalpel blade from the supply closet, then went into the bathroom, and stabbed himself once in the chest area, while standing to the side of the sink. MacDonald is a doctor, so he knew exactly where to stab himself. He used the telephone to call an ambulance, before lying beside Colette's body. He then waited for the military police to show up. On April 6, 1970, Army investigators interrogated MacDonald. He went over his story again, but the investigators were not convinced. Evidence pointed directly back to him. They asked him to submit to a polygraph test. Initially he agreed, but called back later, and refused. On the evening of April 6, MacDonald was relieved of his duties, and placed under restrictions, pending further investigations. The next day he was assigned an army lawyer. His mother recommended that he hire an experienced lawyer, so he hired a flamboyant civilian defense attorney named Bernard Segal to defend him. About a month later, on May 1, the Army formally charged MacDonald with 3 counts of first-degree murder. That same day, MacDonald wrote a letter to Colette's mother and stepfather, claiming his innocence, saying that the Army would never admit their error. On July 6, 1970, an initial Army, Article 32, hearing was held over MacDonald's possible guilt. It was overseen by Colonel Warren Rock. MacDonald's lawyer claimed police incompetence, citing vital evidence being lost, and in one case MacDonald's wallet being stolen by an ambulance driver. A military policeman named Kenneth Micah testified for the defense. He stated that on the night of the murders, while en route to the scene of the murders, he observed a blonde woman with a brimmed hat, standing on the street corner, about a half a mile from the MacDonald home. He remembered it was unusual, given the late hour, and weather that night. In August, MacDonald's lawyer was approached by a delivery driver, who stated that the blonde woman, that MacDonald claimed had attacked his family, may be a 17-year-old drug addict that lives in the area. He said her name was Helena Wells Stockley. According to the delivery driver, Stockley had been with 2 or 3 young men in a car parked outside her apartment around 4 a.m. on the morning of the murders. He also claimed that the woman had stopped wearing her boots and hat after the murders, and she also wore black on the day of the funeral. Stockley was located and questioned. She stated that she could not remember what she had done on that night because she was high on drugs. She knew that she was with her boyfriend that night and they had went out for a drive. She could not say if she had been to the MacDonald's house or not. MacDonald testified for 3 days in mid-August. Some of his testimony contradicted previous statements. He now claimed that he may have washed his hands before calling police, due to his medical training. And that he may have also washed his hands in the bathroom to check his wounds. He also admitted to 2 affairs, but claimed Colette knew nothing of his infidelity, and that their time at Fort Bragg was the happiest time in their marriage. On October 13, 1970, Colonel Rock issued a report recommending that all charges against MacDonald be dropped, stating that there was insufficient evidence to prove his guilt. And furthermore, he stated there was no truth to the charges. He went on to say that the intruders were either insane or on drugs. He recommended that civilian authorities investigate Stockley more thoroughly. Later in October, all charges were dropped against MacDonald. In December, MacDonald received an honorable discharge from the Army, and returned to New York City. He worked there for a short time as a physician. He then relocated to Long Beach, California in July of 1971 where he worked as an emergency room physician. He also became an instructor at UCLA Medical School, a medical director of the Long Beach Grand Prix, a lecturer on the subject of child abuse, and a participant in the development of National Cardiopulmonary Resuscitation Training Program. He lived a promiscuous lifestyle before getting into a long-term relationship with 22-year-old Candy Kramer in late 1970. Colette's mother and stepfather initially fully supported MacDonald, and believed in his innocence. They even testified on his behalf at the hearing. However, over time, they grew suspicious of his reluctance to provide them with a copy of the 2,000-page transcript of the Article 32 hearing. Colette's stepfather finally obtained a copy of the transcript in February of 1971. He studied the document thoroughly, and concluded that MacDonald's claims were inconsistent with the facts. Furthermore, within 2 weeks of his family being murdered, MacDonald began dating a young woman employed at Fort Bragg. In his research, he also discovered that MacDonald had been cheating on Colette, with the girlfriend he had prior to them getting married, Penny Wells. Colette's stepfather, Alfred Kassab, visited the crime scene for hours and compared it to the evidence, and MacDonald's testimony. He became convinced of his guilt, and devoted his life to bringing MacDonald to justice. After several uphill battles on April 30, 1974, the Kassab, their attorney, Richard Kahn, and agent Peter Kearns presented a citizen's complaint against MacDonald, to the U.S. Chief District Court Judge Algernon Butler, requesting a grand jury to indict MacDonald for the murders. The next month, Justice Department Attorney Victor Wahyde ruled that the case is worthy of prosecution. The grand jury convened. Both sides presented evidence and witnesses. MacDonald took the stand in his own defense. On January 24, 1975, the grand jury indicted MacDonald on 3 counts of murder. He was arrested within the hour. Within a week he was released on a $100,000 bond. On January 23, 1976, the indictment charges were dismissed based on the grounds of a defendant's right to a speedy trial. On May 1, 1978, an appeal on behalf of the government led to the reinstatement of the indictment with an 8-0 margin within the United States Supreme Court. On July 16, 1979, MacDonald was finally brought to trial. He was tried in Raleigh, North Carolina before Judge Dupree, and pleaded not guilty to the charges. Jury selection lasted for 3 days. Shortly after 4 p.m. on August 29, 1979, the jury came back from deliberating for 6.5 hours, and announced they had reached a verdict. MacDonald was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder in the death of Kristen, and 2 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of Kimberly and Colette. Jeffrey MacDonald was given a life sentence for each of the murder convictions, to be served consecutively. Over the years MacDonald and his attorneys filed several appeals. Eventually all was struck down. He was sent to the Federal Correction Institution on Terminal Island, California. He was later moved to the Federal Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland. That concludes this volume of Family Annihilators who predate Chris Watts. Keep your eye out for Volume 4, coming soon. If you enjoy stories like this one, consider subscribing.